The hospital that took out my appendix sent me a bill for $51,000. When I told them I couldn't pay it, they didn't lower it. They sued me. I cut hair for a living. I'm a single mom in a 2-bedroom apartment where the rent goes up every year and the raises don't. On the morning the lawsuit landed in my mailbox, I had $400 and some change in my checking account and a 7-year-old who needed new shoes. So when people ask me why I didn't just settle, I want to laugh. Settle with what? Here's the part they didn't count on. I read the bill. All of it. Every single line. And it turned out that the people suing me had broken more rules than I ever could have. This is the story of how a $51,000 debt turned into a refund. Give me an hour and I'll walk you through every page of it, because there is a very good chance that someone you love is holding a bill like mine right now, and they think they have to pay it. They don't. Not most of it. Sometimes not a dime. The best part is the update at the very end, so stay with me for that. But to understand how a bill turns into a refund, you have to start where I started, with none of the answers and all of the fear. So let me back up to the night my side started hurting. My name is Nora, and I'm 34. I've been doing hair since I was 19, first sweeping floors, then behind my own chair at a little salon in a strip mall in Mesa, Arizona, tucked between a nail place and a taco shop. It smells like hairspray and warm towels, and the sugar from the panaderia 2 doors down. I love it there. My regulars have watched my whole life happen in that chair. That chair is a confessional with better lighting. In 15 years, I've heard about affairs and diagnoses and pregnancies before the husbands did. Held hands through divorces. Cut the hair of women heading in for chemo, and cut it again when it grew back. People tell you things when you're standing behind them and they're looking at themselves in a mirror. I know my regulars' kids' names, and their surgeries, and their heartbreaks. So when I tell you that Ruth, Third Thursday, Wash and Set, was just another sweet old lady to me at first, understand that in my world, the sweet old ladies are also encyclopedias. You just have to know which one to ask, and what to ask her. They watched me marry Ellie's dad, and they watched that quietly come apart 4 years later. He's not the villain in this story, which surprises people. He's just a guy who wasn't ready, who sends child support when the mood strikes him, and forgets when it doesn't. Ellie is 7 now. She's the reason I get up, and she's the reason, later, that I couldn't just let this go. I did everything right. That's the part that still gets me. I carried health insurance through the little business plan the salon offered, and it wasn't cheap. It came out of every check, a bite I felt every 2 weeks. But I'd grown up watching my mother skip the doctor because she was scared of the cost, and I swore my kid would never watch me do that. So I paid. I had a card in my wallet. I thought that card meant something. My mom raised 3 of us on a diner waitress's feet, and she treated a doctor's office like a place you only went to confirm bad news you already couldn't afford. She died at 61 of something that gets caught early if you go early, and she didn't go early, because early costs money, and money was for us. I carried her into every one of those insurance deductions. Every time I felt that bite in my paycheck, I told myself it was the opposite of her fear. That I had bought my daughter a mother who could afford to walk into an emergency room. So you can see why the bill hit me the way it did. It wasn't just a number. It was proof that the one thing I'd done to escape my mother's story had somehow failed anyway. Ruth would have told me the truth about that card months earlier if I'd known to ask. Ruth was one of my standing appointments every 3rd Thursday, a wash and a set, 70 years old and sharp as a tack. She'd spent 31 years working in hospital billing offices, the last decade as a supervisor before she retired. She used to say the funniest, darkest things while I rolled her hair. I didn't know yet that she'd end up being the most important person in this whole mess. At the time, she was just Ruth, who tipped in exact change and always asked about Ellie. The night it happened, I was making grilled cheese. Ellie was at the counter doing a worksheet, kicking the stool the way she does, and a pain started low on my right side, dull, like a stitch from running. I ignored it. Mums ignore things. By 9, it had climbed into something mean, a hot fist under my ribs, and I couldn't stand up straight. By 11, I was on the bathroom floor, sweating through my shirt, and I knew, the animal part of me knew, that this was not something to sleep off. I called my neighbor Denise 2 doors down. She's a grandmother who keeps odd hours and a spare key to my place. She took one look at me, gray on the floor, and said we were going to the hospital. No argument. She scooped Ellie up in a blanket, buckled her into the back of her old sedan, and drove us to the nearest emergency room, the big one off the highway, the one with the blue sign you can see for a mile. I want to stop on one small thing, because it tells you everything about how people like me are trained to think. I never once considered calling 911. Even doubled over on that bathroom floor, some scared, frugal corner of my brain was already doing arithmetic, already terrified of what an ambulance ride would cost, already deciding I couldn't afford to be saved the fast way. So I had a grandmother in her slippers drive me instead. That isn't a brave choice. That's what it looks like when you've spent your whole life afraid of the price of your own emergencies. I remember the automatic doors. I remember the cold of the waiting room and the way the fluorescent lights hummed. I remember a nurse pressing on my belly and me nearly coming off the bed. I remember signing something on a clipboard without reading it, because that is what you do when it feels like there's a knife in your side. You sign the paper so they'll make it stop. They ran blood. They rolled me into a scan, one of those big humming donuts, a CT scan, and told me to hold still and breathe. The tech was kind. She had a picture of her own kids taped to the wall of the control room. Somewhere out in the waiting area, Denise was holding my daughter and telling her that Mommy was going to be just fine. And Ellie, 7 years old, was watching those doors like she could will me back through them. The scan showed acute appendicitis. My appendix was about to burst. The doctor, a tired man with reading glasses pushed up on his head, said the word surgery and the word tonight in the same sentence. And after that, it moves fast in my memory. A blur of consent forms, and an anesthesiologist asking me to count backward, and the ceiling tiles sliding past as they wheeled me down a hall. I woke up the next morning with a few small bandages on my stomach and a tube in my arm, and the strangest feeling of relief. It was over. They'd caught it in time. A resident told me the surgery went perfectly, that another few hours and it could have been very bad. I lay there and cried a little, the good kind, the kind that says I get to keep being here for my kid. Denise brought Ellie to see me on the second day. My daughter walked into that room in her mismatched socks, holding a drawing she'd made of the two of us under a big yellow sun. And she stopped in the doorway, because I had a tube in my arm, and I looked wrong to her, smaller against the white sheets. I held out my hand and she ran to it. She whispered, "Are you fixed now?" And I said, "Almost, baby. They fixed me." She taped the drawing to the little rolling tray table, and it stayed there the rest of my stay, the best thing in that whole sterile room. I keep that drawing in the green folder now, right up front, so that every time I open it, I remember what all those papers were actually for. I stayed 3 nights. The nurses were kind, the food was beige, and I watched a lot of daytime television and counted the hours until I could get home to my kid. On the 4th day, they walked me to the curb in a wheelchair, per policy, and Denise pulled up with Ellie waving from the back seat, and I honestly thought the hard part was behind me. That's the thing about these stories. The medical part usually works. The people in scrubs did their jobs and saved my life. What came after had nothing to do with medicine, and everything to do with a billing department in a building I never saw. I went back to work too soon, because bills don't wait and neither does rent. Standing at the chair pulled at the stitches, but I smiled, and I foiled highlights, and I asked about everyone's grandkids. For about 2 weeks, life felt almost normal. Then the mail started. The first envelope was from my insurance company. It wasn't a bill. It was one of those statements they send, the explanation of benefits. The paper that says clear as day at the top, "This is not a bill." I skimmed it. There were columns of numbers, amount charged, amount allowed, plan paid, patient responsibility, and a code in a little box I didn't understand. I set it under the fruit bowl on the kitchen table and told myself I'd deal with it later. The kitchen table is where the mail goes to wait. That table is going to matter, so remember it. The second envelope, a week after, was from the hospital. That one was a bill, and when I opened it, standing at the counter with Ellie's cereal going soggy behind me, the number at the bottom did not make sense. $51,218. Balance due. Amount your insurance did not cover. I actually laughed, one sharp sound, because the mind does something strange when it sees a number it can't hold. $51,000. I make about $40,000 in a good year, before taxes, before the insurance bite, before daycare and gas and everything else. They wanted more than I earn in a year for 3 nights and a surgery that a card in my wallet was supposed to cover. I called the number on the bill. I want you to picture me, in my work clothes, sitting on the edge of the bathtub because it was the only quiet place, my heart going like a rabbit. A woman in the billing office read me the same number off her screen. I asked how that was possible when I had insurance. She said in a bored, flat voice I'll never forget, that my insurance had denied a portion and applied the rest as out of network, and that the balance was my responsibility, and would I like to set up a payment plan today? A payment plan. I did the math while she waited. If I paid $400 a month, which I did not have, it would take me more than 10 years, and that's if they didn't add interest, which she couldn't promise. I told her I couldn't pay that. She said, and I could hear her already moving to the next thing, that if I didn't make arrangements, the account would go to collections. Then she wished me a good day. I sat on the edge of that tub for a long time. Ellie knocked and asked if she could have a snack, and I wiped my face and said, "Of course, baby," and got her some crackers. And that split screen is the whole thing, isn't it? The terror in your chest, and the crackers in your hand. You keep going because there's a small person who needs you to. So I called the insurance company next. This is where the real education started, though I didn't know it. A representative told me that the emergency room I'd been taken to was in my network, which was good, but that the emergency physician who treated me, a separate group that just works in that building, was out of network, and the anesthesiologist, out of network too. I didn't choose them. I was on a bathroom floor. I didn't interview anybody. But those out-of-network doctors had billed their full rates, and my insurance had paid a sliver. And the rest, they said, had been passed to me. Then the representative said something that made my stomach drop. She said there was also a note on the claim that the emergency visit itself was under review for medical necessity. Under review for medical necessity. My appendix had nearly burst. I asked her, my voice shaking, whether a burst appendix counted as a medical necessity. And she said she couldn't speak to the clinical side, she just processed what came through. She suggested I take it up with the hospital. The hospital had told me to take it up with the insurance. I was a tennis ball, and I was getting tired of the game. I wish I could tell you I got organized right then. I didn't. For a couple of weeks, I did what a lot of scared people do. I put the bills back under the fruit bowl. I didn't open the next envelope, or the one after. I told myself that if I ignored it, maybe it would sort itself out. Maybe the insurance would fix it. Maybe some adult somewhere would notice the mistake. Shame does that to you. It makes you hide the thing instead of fighting it. And every day the envelopes sat there under the bowl, glowing at me like they were radioactive. The letters changed tone fast. Please remit payment became, your account is seriously past due, became, final notice before further action. Then a different company's name started showing up, a collection agency, with a return address in another state, and language that got uglier each time. One of them called my cell during a haircut, and I stepped into the back room, and a man told me, almost cheerfully, that people like me always said they couldn't pay, and that the smart ones found a way. I hung up and stood by the sink and shook. Shame is a heavy, stupid thing, and it makes you do the exact wrong move every single time. I didn't tell anyone at the salon. I laughed at the jokes, and I complimented the grandkids, and I foiled the highlights. And the whole time, there was a second version of me standing just behind the first one, holding a stack of envelopes and whispering that I was a fraud, that I was one bad month from losing it all, that a responsible person wouldn't be in this spot. That's the lie the shame tells you. It tells you it's your failure, that you must have done something wrong. It took me a long time and one blunt 70-year-old woman to understand that I hadn't done a single thing wrong. The mistake wasn't mine. I'd just been handed the bill for it. Here is the moment the floor dropped out. About 4 months after the surgery, an envelope came that wasn't a bill and wasn't a letter. It was a summons. The hospital, through a law firm, was suing me for the full balance, plus interest, plus their attorney's fees and court costs. There was a date. There were boxes to check. There were words like judgment and default, and in a lot of small print, the thing that turned my hands cold, the word garnishment. They could take it straight out of my paycheck. They could put a lien on anything I owned. A non-profit hospital, a charity technically, was hauling a single mom into court over a life-saving surgery. I read that summons standing at the mailbox in the parking lot of my apartment complex, and the asphalt shimmered in the Arizona heat, and for a second, I genuinely thought I might be sick right there. Because I understood what it meant. It meant they weren't going to go away. It meant a judge, and a courtroom, and a paycheck I already stretched to the last dollar, now with a target on it. Ellie's shoes, our rent, all of it, suddenly, theirs to reach into. That night, after Ellie was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and finally took every envelope out from under the fruit bowl and lined them up. The explanation of benefits, the first bill, the second, higher bill, the collection letters, the summons. I stared at that pile for an hour, and I felt smaller than I have ever felt in my life. I remember thinking, they picked the right person. I'm nobody. I don't have a lawyer. I don't know how any of this works. They're going to win. Because I don't even know the rules of the game they're playing. I let myself imagine the worst of it, sitting there in the dark. I pictured my paycheck arriving, already bled, a chunk gone before I ever saw it, month after month, for years. I pictured telling Ellie we couldn't do the small things we already barely did. I pictured the word garnishment trailing me to every apartment application and every car loan, a scarlet letter stitched onto a woman whose only crime was having an organ go bad on the wrong Tuesday. I have never felt so completely powerless, so sure that being broke was the same thing as being guilty, that the machine was simply too big and I was simply too small to matter to it. That feeling lasted right up until I remembered who sat in my chair every third Thursday. And then I thought of Ruth. Third Thursday, wash and set, 31 years in hospital billing. I didn't sleep much. But for the first time in weeks, I had one clear thought to hold on to. And it was this. Before I panicked, before I signed anything, I would ask the one person I knew who had spent her whole life on the other side of a bill, exactly like mine. Ruth's appointment was the following Thursday. I nearly told her the second she sat down, but I made myself wait until the shampoo, when it was just the two of us and the water running and nobody could hear. I told her everything, fast and messy. The 51,000, the out-of-network doctors, the medical necessity review, the collection calls, the summons. My voice cracked on the word garnishment. She let me finish. Then she reached up, turned off the water, and looked at me in the mirror with an expression I hadn't seen on her before. She said, calm as anything, that she wanted me to do 3 things before I did anything else. Number 1, do not pay them $1 single. Not yet. Number 2, do not ignore that summons. Because a court date you skip becomes a judgment you lose. And number 3, and here she almost smiled. She wanted me to make them do the one thing hospitals hate most in the world. She wanted me to make them show me the bill. Not the total, the whole thing. Every line, every code, every charge. Itemized. I didn't understand yet why that mattered. She saw it on my face. She patted my hand, the way a grandmother does. And she said the thing that changed the next 6 months of my life. She said, honey, I sent out bills like yours for 30 years. And I'll tell you a secret nobody in that building wants you to know. Half of them are wrong. And they are counting, absolutely counting, on you being too scared and too tired to check. That night, after I put Ellie to bed, I drove to the dollar store and I bought a folder. Green, the accordion kind, with little pockets and a flap that ties shut. $2. It might be the best $2 I have ever spent. I sat at the kitchen table and I took every envelope out from under the fruit bowl, and I gave each one its own pocket, in order, and I wrote the dates on the tabs in my neatest handwriting. That table had been the place where scary mail went to hide. Starting that night, it was the place where I built my case. Same table, different woman sitting at it. Ruth had given me my first 3 marching orders, and I followed them like scripture. Do not pay. Do not ignore the court date. Make them show me the itemized bill. That third one turned out to be the crowbar that pried the whole thing open, So let me tell you exactly how it works, because you can do this too. A bill that says balance due $51,000 is not a bill. It's a demand. Somewhere behind it there's a real document, a line-by-line list of every charge, every supply, every minute, each one tagged with a billing code. Hospitals do not send that to you unless you make them. So I called the billing office, and this time I wasn't crying on the edge of the tub. This time I had Ruth's words in my ear. I said, calmly, that I was requesting a fully itemized statement of my account, in writing, with all of the billing codes, and that I be putting the request in writing too. There was a pause. The bored voice got a little less bored. She said it could take 30 days. I said that was fine. I had 30 days. I had the rest of my life, if that's what it took. I sent the same request by certified mail, the kind where you get a little green card back with a signature, so they could never say they didn't get it. Ruth taught me that. Everything in writing. Every phone call logged with the date, the time, and the name of the person I spoke to. If they wouldn't give a last name, I wrote down that they wouldn't give a last name. A paper trail, she said, is just a story that a stranger can follow later and believe. A judge is a stranger. Build the story so the judge believes it. While I waited for the itemized bill, I did the other thing Ruth told me to do, the thing that scared me most. I dealt with a lawsuit. I drove to the county courthouse on my day off, and I found the self-help center, a quiet room with a tired woman behind a counter and a rack of pamphlets. I want to say this plainly because I didn't know it, and maybe you don't either, that help is free. The woman there did not judge me. She walked me through how to file a written answer to the lawsuit before the deadline, so that I would not lose by default just for staying silent. She told me the single most important thing about being sued over a debt. If you ignore it, you lose automatically, and then they really can garnish your wages. But if you file an answer, even a simple one, you force them to actually prove their case. And a lot of these medical debt lawsuits fall apart the second somebody makes them prove it, because the company suing you often can't even produce a clean, itemized, signed contract for the exact amount they're demanding. So I filed my answer. I checked the box that said I disputed the debt. I wrote, in my own plain words, that the amount was inflated and incorrect, and that I was contesting it. And I mailed a copy to their fancy law firm, certified, green card, into the folder. She also pointed me to a legal aid clinic, free lawyers for people who make what I make, and I made an appointment. I want you to hold that thread, because those two people, a young lawyer named Marcus and a paralegal named Priya, become important. But first, before I ever sat down in their office, the envelope came. It was thick. It was heavier than any bill I'd ever gotten. A whole packet. And I knew before I opened it what it was. The itemized statement. I didn't open it in the parking lot this time. I waited until Thursday, until Ellie was asleep, and I called Ruth and asked if she'd come over. And she said she'd been waiting for this call. She showed up at 7 with her reading glasses on a chain and a yellow highlighter in her purse, like a woman coming to work. We spread the whole thing across the kitchen table under the good light. Page after page after page. Hundreds of lines. A language of codes and abbreviations that meant nothing to me and everything to her. Ruth cracked her knuckles, actually cracked them, and said, "All right, let's go find their mistakes." And Ellie's nightlight glowed down the hall, and the ice maker hummed, and a 70-year-old woman and I sat down to read $51,000, one line at a time. The first thing she found in about 4 minutes, and she found it because it was the first thing she always used to look for. She tapped a line near the top and said, "Well, look at that." They build your emergency visit at the very highest level, level 5. That's the code they use for the most complex, most critical cases, the multi-hour, life hanging in the balance ones. She looked at my discharge papers, at how fast they'd moved me to surgery, at the notes. She said, "Honey, you had a clean textbook appendix. Serious, yes. Level 5? No. Somebody rounded your visit up to the most expensive box on the menu." She wrote a number in the margin, the difference between the level they charged and the level she'd have coded it. Hundreds of dollars, just there. That's called upcoding, she told me. Billing a bigger service than what actually happened. Sometimes it's an honest slip. Sometimes it isn't. Either way, it's yours to challenge. She highlighted it in yellow, first mark on the page. I felt something shift in my chest, something I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't hope exactly. It was more like traction, like my tires had finally caught. Then she found the big one. She'd been running her finger down the charges, muttering the codes to herself, and she stopped. She went back up a few lines. She put one finger on a charge and one finger on another charge, farther down the page, and she held them there, like she was pinning down two ends of a snake. She said, "Nora, look at these." And I looked, and I didn't understand, so she read them to me. The same CT scan, the same code, the same date, the same timestamp, down to the minute. Billed twice. 2 separate charges, $3,400 each, for one scan that went through my body one time. I said, out loud, "That's not possible. They only scanned me once. I was there. I remember the donut and the lady with the picture of her kids." Ruth took off her glasses and looked at me and said, "I know, sweetheart. That's the point. You only got one. They charged you for 2. She circled both, drew a line connecting them, and wrote one word in the margin. Duplicate. $6,800 for a scan that cost half that. And half of that was phantom. Just gone, invented, sitting on my bill like it was as real as my rent. By then, I wasn't scared anymore. I was something else. I got up and made us both tea, the way you do when your hands need a job. And when I sat back down, I said, "Keep going." And she kept going. And the more we read, the worse it got for them, which meant the better it got for me. There was a charge for a medication I never took, dated the day after I went home, when I was already back in my own bed. There were 2 separate room charges for the same single night, as if I'd been in 2 beds at once. There was a charge for a sterile procedure tray, a whole surgical setup, on a day I had no procedure. There was something called a recovery room charge, listed for a longer stretch of time than I was even in the building. Line by line, Ruth's yellow highlighter kept moving, and the margin filled up with her tidy little notes. Duplicate. Wrong date. Never happened. Upcode. Wrong quantity. There was a single pill on that bill. One ordinary over-the-counter pain tablet. The kind that comes $100 to a bottle for a few dollars at any drugstore. And they had charged me $37 for it. One pill. Ruth didn't even bother to highlight that one. She looked at it over her glasses and said, "That's not a mistake, honey. That's the whole business," and moved on. There was a charge for the surgeon's time that overlapped, minute for minute, with the anesthesiologist's charge for putting me under, as if the cutting had started before I was even asleep. There was a fee for a private room I never asked for and don't remember having. Every single line we turned over had something wriggling underneath it. Around 11 that night, she leaned back and took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes and said something I've thought about 100 times since. She said, when I was on the inside, I used to tell the new girls, remember that on the other end of every one of these is a real person at a kitchen table who is scared to death. Most of them never call. Most of them just pay, or they hide, or they let it wreck their credit for 7 years. And the ones who do call, we're trained to make it sound hopeless, so they'll stop calling. She looked at me. You're the one who called, she said. Good for you. Now let's finish the job. Somewhere in there, Ruth went quiet. And then she told me something she had never told me in all our third Thursdays. She said she'd had a bill like mine once, decades back, before she ever worked a single day in billing, when her own kids were small. She said she paid it, every cent, for years, because it never once occurred to her that she was allowed to ask a single question, and it nearly sank her family. She said that was why she took the billing job in the first place, to learn the machine that had almost swallowed them whole. And she looked at me over those reading glasses and said, that's why I'm sitting at your kitchen table at 10 o'clock at night, Nora. Because somebody should have sat at mine, and nobody did. I got up and checked on Ellie the way you do, and she was starfished sideways across her bed, with the covers kicked onto the floor, dead asleep, trusting the whole world to hold itself together while she dreamed. I stood in her doorway a moment. Then I went back to the kitchen and poured us both more tea. And I sat down across from a woman who had turned her own worst year into a lantern for mine. And I said, okay, show me the rest. We read until almost 1 in the morning, and every mistake we found felt less like a number now, and more like a brick I was prying out of a wall that somebody had quietly built between me and my own life. But we weren't even to the worst of it yet, and the worst of it was the part that wasn't a mistake at all. It was built in. It was the way the whole thing was designed. And that's where a young legal aid lawyer named Marcus comes in. So let me take you to that little office. Because if you only remember one part of this whole story, I want it to be this part. This is the part that turns a scary bill into a bill you can beat. Marcus was maybe 30, tie a little crooked, a stack of files on his desk taller than his coffee. Priya, the paralegal, sat in with a legal pad. I brought the green folder, and when I set it on his desk, tabbed and dated and highlighted, Priya actually smiled and said, "Oh, you're going to be easy. Most people bring us a grocery bag. I brought them a case. Ruth had built me a case." Marcus flipped through the itemized bill and the insurance papers, and he started nodding. And then he started writing. And then he said, "Okay, there are 3 completely separate things wrong here, and any one of them would be enough. Together, they're a wall. Let me take them one at a time." And I got out my own notebook, because I was done being a tennis ball. I was going to understand every inch of this. The first thing, he said, is the surprise billing, and that one's not even close. He explained that there's a federal law, only a few years old now, called the No Surprises Act, and what it says is beautifully simple. When you go to an emergency room, you cannot be balance billed by the out-of-network doctors who happen to be working that day. The emergency physician, the anesthesiologist, whoever. You didn't choose them. You were on a bathroom floor. So the law says you only owe what you'd owe in network, your normal copay and coinsurance. And those doctors have to settle the rest with your insurance company, not with you. He tapped the 2 biggest doctor charges on my bill, the out-of-network ones, more than $2,000 each. He said, These are illegal. Full stop. They should never have reached you." I remember just staring at him, because the hospital and the insurance company had spent months bouncing me between them over exactly those charges, and not one single person on either end of all those phone calls had ever mentioned that a law existed that made those charges flatly against the rules. Marcus said, quietly, "They don't mention it because they're counting on you not knowing. That's the whole business model. The people who know don't pay. The people who don't know pay for everyone." Something hot rose up in me, Ben, and it wasn't about the money anymore. I said to Marcus, "So you're telling me that if I'd been a lawyer, or had a lawyer, or just happened to know one blunt, retired billing lady, none of this would have touched me. But because I'm a hairdresser who got scared, they got to try to take my paycheck." He didn't sugarcoat it. He said, "That's exactly what I'm telling you. The whole thing runs on the people who don't know they're allowed to say no." And then he smiled a little and said, "But here's the good news. You know now. And you can't unknow it. So let's go make them very sorry they picked you." "The second thing," he said, "is your insurance trying to weasel out by calling your emergency not medically necessary." He almost laughed. He said there's a standard called the prudent layperson standard, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Your insurance has to cover an emergency based on how the symptoms felt at the time, not on how it all turned out. The test is simple. Would a reasonable person, an ordinary person off the street with your symptoms, believe they needed the emergency room right now? He looked at me. You were doubled over, gray, in the worst pain of your life, with a surgeon telling you a few more hours could have killed you. He said, "No insurance company on earth wants to argue in front of a regulator that that wasn't an emergency. We're going to make them argue it, and they're going to fold." And then he got to the third thing. And the third thing is the one that still makes me shake my head. He asked me one question. He asked, "Is this a non-profit hospital?" And I said I didn't know. And Priya was already typing, and in about a minute, she turned her laptop around and showed me. It was a non-profit. A charity in the eyes of the law. Tax exempt. It pays no taxes on the promise that it serves the community. Marcus leaned forward. He said, "Here's what that means. And this is the one they really don't want you to know. Because they're a nonprofit charity, the law requires them to have a financial assistance program for people who can't afford their bills. Real help, discounts, sometimes the whole bill wiped out, for people at your income. And he said, and this is the important part, before a nonprofit hospital is allowed to do the aggressive stuff, before they can sue you, garnish your paycheck, or wreck your credit, they are required to make a real effort to find out whether you qualify for that assistance first." He let that sit. Then he said, "Nora, did anyone at that hospital ever tell you the financial assistance program existed? Did anyone ever screen you for it, or hand you an application, or ask you a single question about your income?" And I thought about all of it. The billing office, the payment plan lady, the collection calls, the summons, and I said, no, not once. Nobody ever said the word assistance to me in my life. They went from bill to collections to suing me. Marcus sat back and folded his hands and said, "Then they skipped the one step the law says they cannot skip. They came after a single mom who qualifies for charity care without ever offering her the charity they exist to provide. And they did it in a courthouse." He said, "That's not just your defense. That's our counterclaim." There was one more piece, and Priya explained this one because she'd seen it 100 times. She said, "And even the base prices are a fiction." She pulled up what's called the Charge Master, the hospital's master price list, the sticker price nobody actually pays. She said, the insurance companies negotiate those numbers down to a fraction. So the $51,000 isn't even a real price. It's the fantasy retail number they only ever send to the uninsured and the underinsured, the people with the least power. And it's 4, 5, 6 times what any insurance plan would ever pay for the same care. And for someone who qualifies for financial assistance, she said, they're not even allowed to charge that fantasy number. They can only charge you roughly what they charge an insured patient, which, once we're done, is going to be close to nothing. I drove home that night and I sat in my car in the apartment lot for a while before I went up. Not because I was scared, because I was doing math. And for the first time, the math was moving in my direction. 3 walls, Marcus had called them. The surprise billing was illegal. The emergency was covered, no matter what the insurance tried to call it. And the charity hospital had broken its own most basic rule by suing me before it ever offered me the help it's required by law to offer. Every single one of those was a fact I could prove with a piece of paper in a green folder on my kitchen table. So we went to work, and this is the part Ruth loves, because this is the paper trail, and Ruth believes in a paper trail the way some people believe in church. Over the next few weeks, working evenings after Ellie went to sleep, I did not send one angry email. I did not yell at one person on the phone. I did something much colder and much more powerful. I filed. I filed a formal appeal with my insurance company, the written kind they can't ignore, laying out the prudent layperson standard and attaching the surgeon's own records showing exactly how close I'd come. I requested my complete file. Marcus helped me word it so that every sentence was a small closing door. I filed a complaint with the State Department of Insurance, the regulator that sits above the insurance company and does not work for them. I laid out the emergency, the denial, the runaround, in plain dates and plain facts. Regulators are busy people who like a complaint they can actually follow. I gave them one they could follow. I filed a complaint about the surprise bills with the federal helpline set up for exactly that, under that new law, the one nobody had ever mentioned to me. I named the out-of-network charges, dollar for dollar. Somewhere in a government office, my burst appendix was about to become a case number, and for once, that felt like a good thing. I filed a complaint with the State Attorney General's office, the consumer protection side, about the collection calls and about a nonprofit hospital dragging me into court without ever offering the financial assistance it's legally required to offer. And I filled out that financial assistance application, the one nobody ever gave me, the one I'd had to go hunt down myself. I attached my pay stubs and my last tax return. I sent it certified, green card, into the folder. And in the lawsuit itself, with Marcus's help, I did the thing that I think surprised them most of all. I didn't just defend. I filed a counterclaim. I turned around and made claims of my own, right there in their own lawsuit, that they had billed me for services I never received, charged me twice for the same scan, sent me illegal surprise bills the law forbids, and come after me in court without following the rules that a charity hospital has to follow. The people who sued the broke single mom were now, on the record, being sued right back by her. Ruth framed it exactly right. She said, they brought a lawsuit to a paper fight. Bless their hearts. I want you to know it was not glamorous, any of it. It was a lot of nights at that kitchen table with a cheap pen and my reading light, copying account numbers carefully so I wouldn't flip a digit, making 3 copies of everything, one for them, one for the court, one for the folder. Priya taught me to keep a simple log, a spiral notebook, 1 line per contact, the date, the name, what they said, what they promised. I filled half that notebook. It turns out the most powerful thing a scared person can do is become boring and organized and impossible to brush off. I stopped being a phone call somebody could end. I became a paper trail they had to answer. And then for a while, it went quiet. Too quiet. That's the part nobody warns you about. You send all these certified letters out into the world, and then you wait. And the waiting is its own kind of hard. Because your whole life is still happening. Rent was still due. Ellie still needed shoes, and I finally just bought them. Cheap ones, and she wore them proud. The stitches on my stomach faded to little pink lines. I'd stand at my chair at the salon, foiling somebody's highlights, and a customer would be telling me about her sister's wedding, and a piece of my mind would be 3 miles away in a courthouse, wondering if a stranger in an office had opened my folder yet. I want to be honest about the middle of this, because the middle is where most people quit. There was a night, maybe 6 weeks in, when nothing had happened. No answers, just silence, and a court date creeping closer on the calendar. And I sat at that kitchen table and I thought, what if I did all this for nothing? What if they're just bigger than me? What if the green folder is just a scared woman's craft project? Ellie found me there and climbed into my lap, too big for it now, all elbows. And she said, "Mommy, what are all the papers?" And I said, "These are the papers that are going to fix a mistake." And she said, "Okay," with the total faith of a 7-year-old, and went back to bed. And I decided that whatever happened, she was going to grow up knowing that when something's wrong, you don't hide it under the fruit bowl. You read it. You line it up. You make them prove it. The machine didn't stop grinding just because I'd started fighting back either. 2 weeks before the court date, another collector called. A brand new voice, reading the same old script. And for a few minutes on that phone, all my organization and all my certified letters felt like paper thrown at a bulldozer. He didn't know a thing about my appeal, or my complaints, or my folder. To him, I was just a name and a number that hadn't paid. I hung up shaking, the old way. And then I did something new. I opened the folder and I read my own notes back to myself. Every filing, every date, every green card with a signature on it, until my hands went still. The fear was still real, but now I had a stack of paper that was realer. The quiet broke about 10 days before the court date, and it broke all at once, the way a dam does. The first crack was a letter from my insurance company. They had reviewed my appeal. They were reprocessing the entire emergency visit as in-network, as a covered emergency, exactly the way it should have been handled from the start. Just like that, the biggest chunk of the $51,000 simply evaporated, absorbed back into the coverage I'd been paying for out of every single paycheck. The card in my wallet meant something after all. It just took me learning the rules to make it mean something. I sat with that letter for a long while. Every 2 weeks for years, I'd felt that insurance money leave my check and told myself it was worth it. And for months, every person I talked to had made me feel like a fool for ever believing that card would protect me. And here, in 3 plain paragraphs, was proof that it should have protected me all along. The coverage had been real the entire time. The system had a door in it. It was just a door they don't paint any signs for. The kind you have to already know is there. And you have to knock in exactly the right way, or it stays a wall. The second crack came 2 days later. A short, careful letter from the state, confirming they'd opened a file on my complaint and had contacted the hospital and the insurer for a response. That's all it said. But I understood what it meant. And more importantly, the hospital understood what it meant. A regulator was now watching. The single mom they'd counted on to fold quietly was suddenly a woman with the state looking over her shoulder, holding an itemized bill covered in a retired billing supervisor's yellow highlighter. The third crack was a phone call, and it was the one that told me it was really over. It was a woman from the hospital, but not the billing office, not collections. A financial counselor, the kind of person they should have connected me with on day 1. Her voice was warm, embarrassed almost. She said she was calling about my financial assistance application, that based on my income, it looked like I clearly qualified, and then she paused and said, "And I have to be honest with you, I'm looking at your account, and I don't understand why this was ever sent to our attorneys in the first place. You should never have been sued. I'm so sorry." And I sat down on the edge of the tub, the same tub, and this time, I wasn't shaking. This time, I just said, "Thank you." And I meant it. Because sometimes, on the other end of the machine, there's a real person too. And she was one of the good ones. After that, the hospital's expensive law firm suddenly wanted to talk. Funny how that works. Marcus handled the calls, and he called me after each one, and I could hear him half smiling through the phone. He said they've seen the counterclaim, they've heard from the state, the insurance reprocessed it, and they finally actually read their own itemized bill and found the duplicate scan and the phantom charges sitting right there where Ruth found them. He said they know exactly how this looks. A nonprofit charity suing a single mom over a life-saving surgery on a bill full of errors without ever offering her the assistance she qualifies for. He said no hospital wants to explain that to a judge. Or, he added, to a reporter. The court date came anyway, because the paperwork to end it hadn't quite caught up. So I put on my one good blazer and I went. I brought the green folder. I sat on a hard bench in a hallway that smelled like floor wax and nerves, next to people fighting their own quiet battles. And when they called the hospital's case against me, the hospital's lawyer, a polished man with a nice watch, stood up and did the only thing left to do. He asked the court to dismiss the case. With prejudice. Those 2 words matter, Marcus had told me. With prejudice means they can never bring it back. Not ever. Dead and buried. I want to tell you the room gasped, that there was some big dramatic moment. There wasn't. That's not how this kind of justice looks. It's quiet. It's a lawyer in a nice suit saying a few flat words to a judge, and the judge nodding, and a pen moving across a page. The room didn't go silent with shock. It went silent with signatures. And that, it turns out, is the most satisfying sound in the world. It's the sound of a machine that was built to grind you up, stopping, because one person read the manual. But dismissing the lawsuit was just the beginning of them making it right. Because a counterclaim is a beautiful thing, and Marcus was not about to let them walk away having only undone the harm they'd started. The settlement we signed a few weeks later did all of it. The entire remaining balance, every dollar the insurance hadn't already absorbed, was written off to zero. Gone. The financial assistance I qualified for was applied retroactively, the way it should have been from the very first day. The duplicate scan, the phantom charges, the upcoded visit, all corrected, all erased. They agreed to withdraw everything they'd reported about me to the credit bureaus, so that the black mark that had been dragging down my credit score, the one that could have cost me an apartment or a car loan for 7 years, would be pulled clean off my record like it never happened. And because I had actually managed to scrape together and pay them a little over $1,100 early on, back when I still thought I had to, back before Ruth, before the folder, they refunded every penny of it. A check made out to me from the hospital that had been suing me 4 months earlier. I got that refund check on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are slow at the salon, and I had time to just hold it. $1,100 and change. Money I had genuinely believed was gone forever. Sacrificed to a mistake too big to fight. I sat in my car and I called Ruth first, before anyone, because she was the one who told me the secret nobody wanted me to know. She just laughed, this delighted, cackling laugh, and she said, "Half of them are wrong, honey. I told you. Half of them are wrong." I used part of that refund to take Ellie to the dentist for the braces consultation I'd been putting off for a year. I used a little of it to buy her the good shoes this time, the ones she'd wanted. And I told her they were fixed mistake shoes, and she has no idea what that means and wears them everywhere. And I put the rest in the little envelope in the back of the green folder. The folder that started as a $2 craft project on a night I felt like nobody, and became the most powerful thing I have ever owned. It's still on top of the fridge. I'll never throw it out. So here's the update, the part I promised you all the way back at the beginning. It's my favorite part, and it's the real reason I wanted to tell this whole story, so thank you for staying with me this long. What happened after that refund check turned out to matter a great deal more than the check ever did. It's been a little over a year now since all of it finally ended. My credit healed completely, the way they promised, and last month I got approved to move Ellie and me into a slightly bigger place. A real second bedroom for her, a tiny patch of yard. When the leasing office ran my credit, it came back clean, and the woman said, "Oh, this is great. No problems at all." And I had to turn my face to the window for a second, because a year earlier, a hospital had almost taken that away from me over a scan they charged me for twice. The hospital, from what I hear, had a harder year than I did. The state didn't just close my little complaint. My complaint was apparently not the only one. I heard, through the legal aid office, that regulators started looking harder at how that whole system was suing patients, and that the hospital very quietly changed its policy. They now screen people for financial assistance before they send anyone to collections, which is the one step they skipped with me, the step the law required all along. I'd like to think there are people out there right now getting a discount or a clean slate they never had to fight for, because one hairdresser in a strip mall refused to be too tired to check. I hope so. That's the update that matters more than my refund. I paid Denise back too, in the only currency she'd take. She wouldn't hear a single word about gas money for that midnight drive, so instead I do her hair now. No charge, every few weeks. And afterward, we sit out on my little patch of yard and drink iced tea, while Ellie draws on the sidewalk with chalk. She's the one who got me to the hospital that saved my life, and then, without ever knowing it, set in motion the year I saved myself from that same hospital. Funny how one night can hold both of those things. I told her once that she'd rescued me twice. She waved me off and said she'd only driven a car. That's what the good ones always say. Ruth still comes in every third Thursday, wash and set. Still tips in exact change, still sharp as a tack. But something else happened, and this is the part that made the whole ugly year feel like it was for something. A regular of mine, a young dad, mentioned one day while I was cutting his hair that his wife had just had a complicated delivery, and the bills were insane, and they didn't know what they were going to do. And I heard myself say, calm as anything, the way Ruth once said it to me over a running sink. Don't pay them a dime yet. Don't ignore any court papers. And first, before anything else, make them show you the itemized bill, line by line. He looked at me the way I must have looked at Ruth, like I was speaking a foreign language, like I couldn't possibly mean it. So I told him to come by on a Thursday evening and bring everything, all of it, and we'd spread it out on my kitchen table under the good light and find their mistakes together. And we did. And you know what we found right there on page 2? A duplicate. Same code, same day, billed twice. I circled it, and I wrote the word in the margin, and I felt Ruth standing behind me the whole time, grinning. That's the thing I understand now that I didn't understand on the bathroom floor almost 2 years ago now. That table isn't where the scary mail hides anymore. It's where the mistakes come to get caught. The green folder isn't a scared woman's craft project. It's a torch, and you're supposed to pass it. Somebody handed it to me when I was sitting in the dark, and the only rent you pay on a thing like that is you hand it to the next person sitting in the dark. I looked it up afterward because I couldn't believe I'd felt so alone in something so common. It turns out a huge share of the people around you are carrying medical debt right now, quietly, the exact way I did, stuffing it under a fruit bowl and calling it their own private failure. Your coworker, the person ahead of you in the checkout line, the mom at school pickup who always looks a little tired. It is the most ordinary catastrophe in America, and almost nobody says a word about it, because the shame keeps every one of us sitting alone at our own kitchen table in the dark. That's the part I want to break. You are not the only one holding one of these. You're just the one who's about to read it. So if you take one thing from my story, let it be this. When a bill or a company or a system tells you that you owe something you can't possibly owe, you are allowed to make them prove it. Ask for it in writing. Get it itemized, line by line. Never assume the number is right just because it's printed and it's big and it's scary. The people sending it are counting on your fear and your exhaustion. Disappoint them. Read it. Line them up. Make them prove every dollar. Half of them are wrong. If this story meant something to you, do me a small favor and hit that subscribe button, because these stories only find the people who need them when you do. And I'm genuinely curious what you all think, so be honest with me in the comments. Was I wrong to fight a nonprofit hospital tooth and nail over a surgery that saved my life? Or did they have it coming the second they sued a single mom without ever offering her the charity they exist to provide? Tell me where you land. And I always love to know who's out there listening, so drop your state and your age, and if you've ever gotten a medical bill that made you laugh out loud at how impossible it was, tell me about it. Somebody scrolling by tonight is holding a bill just like mine, and your comment might be the thing that tells them to read it. I'll see you in the next one.